Hi, this is David Kamatoy here. On today's show, we're going to talk about success principles and do you need an MBA? From a man with not one, but two MBAs, Fran Cannon. Hi, everybody, this is David Kamatoy, and welcome to the show. We're talking about success. If you're an entertainer, entrepreneur, e-marketer, if you want to take your project to the next level, then this is the place to be. Whether you're listening to us or watching us or doing Braille, we're here. Joining me in studio is Fran Cannon. Welcome to the show, Fran.
Hey, thanks, David. Great to be back with you.
It's been years.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
So, Fran, like all of us, life happens. And, obviously we've all lost a lot. We've gained a few things over COVID. But Fran joins us. Fran Cannon of Cannon Training and Development. I've known him through many years of the seminar business and also working with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. But the more interesting thing about Fran, he's actually a seminar guy, a public speaker, motivational guy who actually has the other side. Not one, but two MBAs. I'll say that again. Not one, but two MBAs. Like, how do you get two MBAs, Fran? I mean, you just like, I needed another one? Was it a 2-for-1 special?
Oh, just to go crazy, and you decide that maybe I want a little bit more depth in what I was doing. I got my first MBA with San Diego State after coming out of the service, and then I was working for a company where we were doing contracts, and vice president there of contracts decided he wanted to teach all his contract people about contracts, so he hired one of the university people to come in, and I got a couple of credits out of that, and I finally decided, well, I'm going to turn that into a degree. So I got a second degree then in contracts negotiation.
That's crazy. I mean, to me, that's what's fascinating, because, I mean, how many people do we meet in this work of personal development, self-development, and they're self-made? Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Some of the best people are people who had no official training, but other times, a lot of people, they're missing that step. They're missing that actual step. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, which was, there's many Fran principles, I like to call them, that I always quote you in our conversations about business and entrepreneurship and coming up and what a struggle it is. But I think it's fascinating that that we're so afraid of making mistakes. I think that's like the big thing that came up to me when I was doing the intro was like, hey, from a juggling principle, as being a juggler, I always tell people you cannot learn to juggle without dropping. And I think I watch kids and they're fearful of dropping. I'm like, hey, you're not going to learn this without making a mistake. But I think I'm afraid of making mistakes, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are the same way. Well,
when you're out there and you're putting on a show and that, what you do is turn that mistake into some kind of humor or inviting the audience. So you use everything you comes up, you use, but then you also learn. If you're open to it, you learn more about the skill. So your failures are much greater teachers than your success.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's what's strange is I consistently have to remind myself and our audience, it's like you need to make mistakes. There was a professor from Brown University, I think it was. This is a hearsay tale from a magazine article. But what he said was his students asked him, should I do this now? And he was absolutely yes. I mean, do it now when you're young and you can make mistakes, and all you have to do is if you blow it up, just have a beer and try it again. Whereas when you're, 20 to 30 years later, you have a family, you have kids,
right.
Like that's a harder process.
You got a whole lot more on the table. And it's what happens with people when they lose their job at 50. They build up to an expertise in that particular mode. But they're not skilled now in doing something else. So when they get booted out of the industry, in the tech industry, and it closes down and throws a lot of jobs away, most of those people don't really have a backup plan about where to go, and especially not for the kind of money they were getting in the technical industry. So I've got a few friends that are in that place right now in the mid-50s. They're looking to hire these 22, 23-year-olds. They were being paid $100,000, $150,000 a year. Now they're in the 54, 55, no job, and the tech industry isn't hiring.
Wow. So very quickly, can you give us a little bit of some of the projects you've worked with over the years? I mean, what industries? Because again, I'm imagining people just, they go, it's Fran Cannon, but who is Fran Cannon? I mean,
well, I've done a lot of both business work and personal development work. And the personal development work has helped me with the business clients and the business coaching, because what it does is talk to them about their personality and how to accept failure from that standpoint, and understanding that there's a whole lot more to the growth cycle for them. So I've worked with IBI, another training and seminar work, teaching a lesson about how to raise capital for your company, and a very in-depth piece of work where you have to go out and know who to ask, asking people who have the ability to help you. It comes down to the asking skills about how to make this thing work for yourself. So both in seminar work and in businesses, and working with the military, working on military lessons and equipment and contracts, and negotiating with the military is another case altogether, because they always have some big technical thing they want to get done, and they keep adding specs to it even after they've given you a contract. So you got the same amount of money, but they want more.
Yeah. Well, I think you've identified kind of two interesting things that we don't think about in that simplicity, which is basically what is contract negotiation, what is business. It's really getting what you want. It really comes down to asking, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And there's many things that come up with asking. And Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield, they've done that Chicken Soup for the Soul, and they've sold like 100 million copies of that book. And it's a wonderful, heart-wrenching thing to read some of those stories, but there's no lessons in there. But one book that they created was really more powerful, and it was called The Aladdin Factor.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite. I recommend that book to every entrepreneur that I'm in. Like, the book you want to read is this.
Yeah, and I have both tapes on it and the books on it, and I was just going over it this morning, and some of the lessons that they have in there are really very interesting, in how to be powerful in the way you ask, and the levels that you have to go through to make it work. Like, for instance, a couple of them, like being specific. You have to really understand what you're asking for. You can't ask in general. You got to say, instead of saying, I need some more money, you have to say, I need $20,000. In one of the personal development seminars I was doing, there was a lady who was going through the work, and she was challenged about raising $10,000. She came up with a number herself. I'd like to raise $10,000 in the next 6 weeks. Well, it's like, okay, how are you going to do that? Where's the skill coming from? It sounded like an unreasonable request for her. But what happened is that she went back to work, and somebody there had a program trying to raise money for cancer, breast cancer and that. And she tied right into that, and she went out to all her friends and everybody around her, and she did raise $10,000 in that 6-week period.
That's crazy. I mean, and that's, we just had this discussion about raising capital and what you need next. And the thing about it was that, when we did our, raising of money for different various projects, including nonprofits, what I always found was that, like you said, it was easier when you could be very specific about what the money was being used for and how that could help the business and move it forward. And the generality doesn't really help you. If they can, and especially to, the check writer, right? If I can see it and I know that that's where my money's going, it seems like that's an easier way to go.
Yeah, and people want to know what you're thinking about spending the money on, because they do want to track you about how you're spending it. You're not just suddenly going out and buying yourself a car with their investment money.
Fran, I need to raise some money because I have my eye on this Maybach that I really just want to drive to the studio. Hey, once again, you're watching the DavidKamatoy.com show with me, Fran Cannon. You can find him at francannon.com. We'll be right back in just a few minutes to talk more about success principles. Success is a learned behavior. Once again, if you're an entertainer, entrepreneur, e-marketer, if you want to hang out with us and take your project to the next level, this is the place to be. Hey everybody, we're back once again in the studio with Fran Cannon. You can visit him at francannon.com. Cannon Training and Development, not one but two MBAs, sitting at the feet of the master. So we were talking about, just let's do 60 seconds on this, but we're talking about the great book, just for a minute, The Aladdin Factor. And the reason is, Mauricio, you have to read this book. Mauricio is our director. He's operating camera right now, but Mauricio also is a filmmaker, and he's working on, putting his film together and talking to actors. And I just think it's an insanely important book.
Well, we were talking just a few minutes ago about the first principle is that you have to be specific in what you ask for, and what comes next is you have to ask with congruent belief. You have to really believe that you deserve this money, because if you go to somebody and say, well, you wouldn't want to loan me $1 million, would you? And there's no belief behind it. So you have to be able to go to somebody who knows how to help you. You can't be going to your friends and your family. Don't hire anybody from your family if they're not really trained and skilled already. Go find competent people to be with.
Right. Be specific and have a congruent belief behind what you're doing. Have a plan.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, I believe that many of us have the challenge of just not being ready for it. Right?
Right.
I mean, that's it. Like, we think we're ready for it. We keep asking for it, but we're focused on everything but what's next.
Yeah. And the third principle is that you really do have to find people who are qualified who can help you, whether that's the skill they need or whether it's money that they're lending to you. You're not going to raise $1 million out of your family.
Right. Well, some people do. Some people do. But the other part of that, too, is that finding the right people also has to do with the ability to ask for the right people, because a lot of people have the biggest challenge of, like, if I'm asking for something huge from you, the first thing is, well, I don't have it. Yeah, but who do you know? Right. I mean,
the who do you know is really the biggest piece of that, because you may have to go and ask 20 or 30 people before you can really get what you need. And each time you ask, it has to become a learning lesson about how you're asking. What did I do wrong? How did I present that? And ask for feedback. When you go to people and you ask for money and they say, oh, I don't want to be part of this project. Say, all right, well, what do you think about the project itself? Well, it was a pretty good project. Do you know somebody else who might be interested in this kind of work? And they just have to get into that chain of people and say, is there something else you can give me, some information that would make my presentation better?
Yeah.
And people love to share.
So just real quick, this is just to pick up when we're talking about the asking principles, the Aladdin Factor, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, and the principles were be specific, have a congruent belief in what you're pitching. Correct. Find the right people to talk to. And again, we mentioned that idea of, if it's not right for you, it may be right for someone that you know. But there's one more big value that goes into this little package.
And that is create value for the people you're involving in the project. If you want money from somebody, when you're specific and they get it, and they can see that there's a real high probability that they're going to get a return on their investment, you created value for them, so they'll invest. Now, sometimes that value is unknown to you, because if you have people who want to contribute, and there's always people out there saying, we contribute this amount of money. You buy our product, you buy our car, we will donate $1,000 to a certain charity.
Right.
Some people really get tied into those kinds of contributions.
And what's interesting about it, too, is that a lot of times what people don't understand is the value is not always the bottom line.
That's right.
Sometimes it's literally, I've known you for years and I want to see you succeed. Or you remind me of myself. Or it has to do with a nonprofit.
Very good. Very good points on that one.
Well, the other part of it, too, is that, and this goes back to what we, are talking about, in the sense that everything takes time. And what a lot of people don't realize is that they may say no to you now, but that does not mean that they're going to say no to you forever.
Right.
And it's just one of those weird, people don't realize, it's like, it doesn't happen. Part of it is our own fault. we're media, we're television, we're radio. What I really want to do with the studio is make film and television. But the problem with narrative film and television is everything gets solved in 90 minutes.
That's correct.
Everything gets solved in, like, we just saved the world, Mauricio, and we did it in 90 minutes because you watch a movie, right?
Right.
It's like that's not real life. Real life is I ask, I fail, I ask, I fail, I fail,
Absolutely.
I fail, I ask, I do it again, right? So that comes back to one of the biggest lessons that I always think of Fran Cannon when I think about this, but the idea of the myth of small businesses. The myth is that most small businesses fail. But what's wrong with that belief system? Because I think a lot of us take that in, right? I'm like, I'm going to fail. But that's...
There is a concept there that a lot of businesses don't make it past the second or third year. And it's because they're usually the newest person in. They haven't built the skills, the connections, the people who can support them. They don't know really how to do the advertising. Sometimes they try to take over somebody else's losing business, which is really a no-no unless you're an absolute expert on bringing back businesses from the brink. So when you are out there doing that sort of work, you just have to think that I'm an entrepreneur. So I have a good friend by the name of Burke. I think you know him, David.
Burke Franklin, yes.
Burke Franklin. And he in his book, he says that 80% of the people who get into business fail. It's just the nature of the business of trying to get in and learn. He said, that doesn't mean that they've gone away, because what you find out is that more than half of those people are serial entrepreneurs. So they come back again and again and again. And finally, they have a business that really works, makes some great money for them. They're able to pay back their investors. And they did it all overnight.
Yeah, exactly. It's the overnight success that took 20 years to build.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's the other thing too, is that when I it's one of the reasons why now, one of the reasons like the book and the project we're coming up with, yournameasabrand.com. Our whole idea is that when people come to me with ideas now and brands, I go, yeah, but are you building your brand as well?
Right.
I mean, because there are some entrepreneurs, and I've worked with them, that they are super introverted. Like they're like, I'm not building me. I don't want to build me. And I respect that, because those guys have actually built a pretty strong business. On the other hand, there's a group of people like similar to myself or yourself that are a little bit more extroverted. And at the same time, but what's interesting about them is that sometimes they want to fall on the sword of the project, like this is a good project by Amelia. They want to fall on the sword of saying, I'm all about this, whatever this project is, and they ignore themselves. And my whole thing is like, okay, I've done this for decades now, and imagine what would be if you took 10 to 20% of the money you're spending on branding a project, on branding yourself.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm trying to do now. That's why that's why it's called the DavidKamatoy.com show. It's not just about me, it's about you and watching this, because I guarantee that the project that you're working on, you're going to do another one. Right?
Yeah, well, you've done dozens of them.
Oh, yeah. At the same time. Like right now. So that leads me to my other Cannon principle, which is what they don't teach you in school. And I think this is fascinating, because this is coming from not one, but 2 MBAs. And the concept is what they really don't teach you in school. And you do a complete lesson on that. But if you're watching, when we come back, we're going to sit down with Fran and talk about what they don't teach you in school. And do you really need 1 MBA or 2 MBAs or 3? What if I just topped you and got 3?
Oh, great.
We'll be right back. I'm David Kamatoy. This is Fran Cannon.
Hey, this is Mark Christopher Lawrence, and I was told to make a trailer for my new podcast, Call Time. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to put these glasses on, because it makes me look a little more professional. Lends a little bit of authenticity and professionalism to it. So, podcast, Call Time. It's a behind-the-scenes look at professionals in the entertainment industry, actors, comedians, musicians, and others who have these wonderful stories that we tell each other behind the scenes. And you probably aren't privy to some of these stories. And you probably aren't privy to some of these stories. Some of these stories, have been held in the minds of the beholders for years, and they're just dying to tell them. So, call time. Buckle up. It's coming.
Hi, everybody. This is David Kamatoy. You're watching the show. With me in studio is the great Fran Cannon. He's back, ladies and gentlemen, of Cannon Training and Development. We're doing seminars, doing events. We're talking about the success principles. Remember, success is a learned behavior, something I remind myself every day. So let's talk about, again, Fran actually has not one but 2 MBAs, but he's also a seminar guy who said to me several times, you don't need it. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. How does that work? You went to school twice and you're telling me I don't need an MBA? Let's talk about that a little on that. What don't they teach you in school?
They don't teach you real entrepreneur stuff. What they do is give you, in the business schools, they give you a little blue book. And you'll find that when you go into the business schools, you'll end up like 15 of these little blue books that teach you a specific topic. I should say, let you read about a specific topic, but it doesn't really teach you how to do it. There are books on entrepreneurs and what that entrepreneur did in that specific field and how he got lucky enough to make it work in that field. And that's what they call case studies in the schools. And they're interesting, but the real principles of asking and knowing how to go out and build your business and having the experience and maturity and understanding the learning curves, that as you go up, the way you really learn is you make a lot of mistakes.
Right.
So you just got to keep making those little bit of mistakes. That's why you don't bet the whole pot on one hand. You bet a bet.
Well, it's like when this is a kind of an aside, but for instance, when I was coming out of high school, I was known more as an entertainer, as a theater person. And so, and at the time, back in the day, it was like, the mentality was get a good, safe job, or you're doing one thing. They didn't have the idea of doing multiple things. They would you do one thing. So many of my advisors wanted me to go to theater school. And I didn't want to go because I had spent since I was age 5 doing theater and performance, and I really didn't. That was not interesting to me, and I wish one of them would have said, "Just get a degree in something else, like just as quickly as you can. Doesn't matter what it is, just get a piece of paper." And I would have been, that would have been better advice instead of someone looking at me going, "You should get a theater degree," and I'm like, I just spent a decade doing this, over a decade. I don't want, because really, when you think about it, it really is about mistakes. Like, right? It's about you go someplace to make mistakes. And so it's like, if I had a decade of making mistakes on stage, why do I need another 4 years of making mistakes? And sure enough, from my own experience, what happened was when I started working professionally as an actor, really professionally in my mid-20s, sure enough, the people I were acting against were people with master's degrees and with degrees in theater, but we had the same roles and we got paid the same amount of money.
Right,
And there was... sure enough. But again, that's my experience because I had the experience.
Well, I think that's a great example. You were out there doing the work, which is really where the learning is. There's one thing to read it in a book. There's another thing to be out there and put yourself on a line in front of several hundred people in a small theater. And sometimes you mess up and you get booed and stuff like that, or people get up and walk out because they don't understand what it's about. That's a real learning experience. All the comics are known for, once they do their act, they go back into the room, their bedroom or wherever they're staying that night, and they re-listen to their tapes to hear where the audience laughed, what was a good thing, how did I do it tonight, and they learn through that.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Is like when we're all working with actors and entertainers, and even again, same thing with public speakers or politicians. And the thing is, the difference between the tried and true professional is that they they know ultimately how to take direction, and they can also give directions to themselves, and they know the difference.
Right.
Like there's a difference between the guy or gal that we say, hey, do it this way. And then they often actors will go, was it good? Right, Mauricio? They're like, hey, was that good? And we're like, yeah, it was good. But the real true actor who knows his own body and his craft, they know it was good and why it was good because they have full control of their faculties. And I think that's true of a business person. I think that's true of an actor, an entertainer. Right. They know they eventually get to the point when they know that they're good.
Yeah, and it's called knowing what you know and it's one of the 4 boxes when it gets to understanding whether you really know the subject, you really know the facts about it, and somebody else tries to say something to you, you absolutely know when you're right. Not just like, oh, I feel like I'm right about this. You know. The intelligence level is there to let you know. And when you don't have that in place, you have people like getting a little bit of knowledge and thinking they're really, really smart. And the confidence level is extremely high. And Dunning-Kruger had proven through their research that when you get into that kind of a level, that you're way down on a learning curve, a little bit of knowledge, it's like teenagers, get a little bit of knowledge about how to drive, and all of a sudden they think they can go out there and speed around the block and all that, driving around this 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pound car as if it's a speed demon. But what happens is that once your learning comes to you, and school can teach you a little of this, and that is as you come up the curve, doctors and things like that, as you come up the learning curve, all of a sudden you reach a point where you understand that you don't know as much as you thought you did. You know more than ever before, and the things you do know, you're fairly confident about, but there's a whole world out there you know nothing about. So it's shown out when you're down and know a little bit, you're way overconfident versus you know a lot, but you're not as confident that you know everything.
Right. I used to say, between knowledge and wisdom lies pretentiousness.
That's right. That's a good quote.
Thank you. That's mine.
That's
you.
That's right.
No, but it's true. It's like between knowledge and wisdom lies pretentiousness. And a lot of the times we deal with people that are just insanely pretentious. And often, and I admit, at one point, I did the same thing. That's kind of where the quote actually came from, because, he seems a little pretentious. I'm like, and years later, I'm like, guess I was, and then now I'm like, but now my problem now, Fran, is that, it's like, because we live in America where the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yes.
And the extroverted, like if I walk in the room and say, I could do this, then people believe you, even though you can't, which is weird. And so I've reached that point now where I'm like, okay, I know more than I forgot, but I kind of need to bring back a little bit of confidence and congruency.
Right.
So people will go, oh, you are the guy to talk to.
That's right.
Because if I don't, I fall into that Asian introverted gap where I just kind of sit like this, and they're like, oh, and then people say, the worst thing you can do, by the way, this is when you know you're not doing well branding yourself, is when people walk up to you, and let's say you're a graphic designer, you're a little bit introverted, you don't really talk about your work, but things are wrong when people walk up to you and they say, people for years, and they look at you and they go, hey, I just hired this great graphic designer. Look at this logo. Right?
What?
Like, wait, what about me?
Yeah.
What about me? It's like the same thing if you're dating a girl and the girl walks up to you and says, hey, I just went on this great date. But to me, that's where there's a balance between, like, again, being confident, letting people know what you do, but at the same time, not being, you don't want to be forgotten, because
like they say in a good book, a prophet is not honored in his own town. So.
Exactly right. So things that they don't teach you in school, like another good example you gave was like balancing your checkbook or buying a car or a house, right? These are things that we just...
Yeah, those things are left to you to figure out on a social basis with people or going to a bank, or they're not very good about teaching you life skills.
Right.
They're about teaching theory about how big business works or how you would analyze a project. But that's paperwork.
Sure.
And you go and you study in your desk in your office, and you do all the paperwork and scribble down stuff, and come in and you do a great report and put a thesis in, and you get honored for your master's degree or doctorate's degree, and then you go out in the world and you say, okay, who's going to hire me?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there with these degrees that have not been hired.
Now, switching gears, but kind of staying on the same route.
Yeah.
We talk about master's degree, but let's talk about mastery, because one of the challenges that we're seeing, and again, I am the multi-creative guy, and my whole mission right now is to just talk to multi-creatives that are all over the place and say, look, focus, learn how to focus to do one thing really well. But the thing that I'm seeing, and this is something that's happened to us over the last decade of working with both kids, entrepreneurs, students, is that they're having a tendency to be spread out, and that they don't necessarily master a thing. They don't become a black belt in a thing. Right. And so the problem that I see is that you end up being a white belt, a beginner in all these things, and there's no mastery. And our model has always been master something because you can apply that mastery to other things.
Right.
So let's talk about that.
Well, when you master something, that's where the real money is. That you come out, instead of being a jack of all trades, you come out to be a really fantastic plumber, because you have learned over 20 years about how to fix things in ways that other people just coming into the business have no idea. And you're well worth your money, and you come with the congruent belief that you are really worth the money you are charging. And you make no apology to people. You can get proper amount of pay. You got to pay for your trucks, you got to pay for your business, you got to pay for your time on the road, but you got to get the right compensation for it. And when you walk in and do a great job and you don't mess it up and you leave a happy customer, that's mastering your skill or your technical ability.
So Malcolm Gladwell, we talked about him before, and a lot of people always bring up 10,000 hours, and I get it, because I've done 10,000 hours on a bunch of different things, but but it doesn't necessarily have to be 10,000 hours to master a specific trait or part, right? I mean,
no, the Gladwell's work was very interesting. I loved reading the book and the concept of it, but he's talking about 10,000 hours of highly specific work. In other words, when you're a pianist and you're working on it, just repeating the same thing 2 hours a day, repeating the same music you always do, is not the thing. The thing that you really get to in mastery is when you have intentionality about, when I'm practicing today, there's this one hand movement place or one of these crossovers I have to do in the music, and I can't seem to get that right. And all you do is work on that until you get it right. So it blends back into what you already know. Now, you're going to want to play all of your music every once in a while, but you have to have a lot of intentionality to go after the problem areas that make you really great. 10,000 hours is 5 years of 2,000 hours a week,
right.
A year. And you can reach levels of credibility much earlier than that. If you got 2,000 hours in of real intentionality learning, you've learned a lot more than 90% of the people, 95% of the people will know in the world.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of examples, like as an actor, we constantly, like our good friend Mark Christopher Lawrence had to learn how to play piano for, I cannot remember the name of the show, but he's not a piano player, but he can play a song and sing to the point where people are like, oh my God, you play. And so I think there's specific niches where you can master a certain level of.
That's right.
It was oh my God, I can't remember his name. He lives here in town. Another motivational guy, not Jim Britt. It's oh my God, we're gonna have to insert this so I don't totally blow it. But anyway, what he taught was he talked about the difference between entrepreneurs or business owners and job people, is that what people don't realize is that most jobs you learn in about a year. Yes. And I was like, oh my God, he's right. Like if I wanted to be a cook, a waiter, deliver mail, it doesn't matter, right? Even edit, right? I can learn an edit program. I can learn to edit a commercial or a TV show probably in about a year. But then he said that most people just continued to do that job for years.
Right.
And but the definition of entrepreneurs, they just move on. They like learn something and they.
And that's what happens, that people learn a year of stuff, different ones. So they never get up the mastery curve. So instead of just being a short order, could you be a top-notch chef in a high-class restaurant? That takes a lot of intentionality to get to that level, both experience and burning a few things like the carrots that I had in the stove the other night. my wife was a tremendous cook, but now I'm out having to cook for myself, and I burned a few things.
Yeah.
And I always wondered how come she couldn't keep from having things get a little overdone sometimes. And it's like, I got that lesson really big now.
I think the note that I kind of want to end on this is the fact that of two things. One is, for many of us, the idea of 10,000 hours is daunting. Yes. And the other reality is that it's sometimes not real. And so one of the biggest lessons I learned was that, it's easy to make money. The question is, how do you want to make money? And but the same is true of any skill set that you want to learn. If you want to be a pop star, if you want to be a pianist, if you want to be an entrepreneur that makes billions of dollars, the question is, are you willing to put in that level of time?
Right.
And it's okay to say no, and then your expectations and your goal changes, right?
Yeah, I remember an old quote where the guy said, "You know what? I'm just too busy earning a living to become a millionaire." So you get enough to get some food and rent money for the year, for the month, but you're not really building the skill to get into where the big money is, that you can trade things or buy and sell real estate in the proper way. You're just trying to pay your rent bill this month.
Which becomes, I'm too busy making a fortune to make a living.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the opposite of that is of just that. So I would say that, and that's something that you help people with, right? I mean, your one of your tenets is helping people figure out what's important.
Sure. Well, how do you get a proper return for the effort that you're putting in? And you learn to create very high value for people. You can't sell what you don't really have. People will see through that in a heartbeat. But if you really know how to do it, you've come to mastery in certain areas. You wow people. You walk in and say, wow, I just didn't think about that. I didn't know how you'd have to break the wall down to get to the plumbing so you can fix it up and retile it. And it's like, I just thought it was a job you'd come in and knock it out in a day. No, it takes me 3 weeks to come in here and do a proper job. And when they're done, it looks fantastic because they brought their skills to it. They get a lot of referrals to other people.
So once again, our guest in studio who will be joining us again and again, Fran Cannon of Cannon Training and Development. You can visit him at francannon.com. You can always visit us at davidkamatoy.com. And of course, join the email list. Check out Juggle Mail. Anything else? Any last words of wisdom before we get out of here?
I think I wish each person out there to be able to have that spirit of being an entrepreneur, because there's so much more freedom to it. And you might take you a couple of years to get to that skill, but you should be practicing mastery every day, no matter what field you're in. So we talked about that 1 year lesson that you get at work. Well, that's because people only learned about 40% of what they really could learn. So go back into mastery. If you ask somebody when they're doing something on the computer and say, have you ever read the book on it? Do you really know how this whole program works? 99% of those people have no idea what's in the rest of the book. They got just enough to put in a few little icons or something like that, and they're done.
Fantastic.
So, never get to mastery.
Never get to mastery. So once again, we want to inspire you to master your skill sets and your business and take it to the next level. Once again, visit us at davidkamatoy.com and francannon.com. And Mauricio, thank you, sir. We're out. The davidkamatoy.com show is brought to you by Kamatoy Media Group, a media and business development company. Take your business to the next level with Kamatoy Media Group.